Welcome to Daily English Room. Today's topic is books. Do you enjoy reading books?
Definitely. In my line of work as a tour guide, reading helps me gather interesting facts and stories about different places. Plus, I love reading about outdoor adventures.
What kind of books do you usually read?
I mostly read travel literature, books about local history, and adventure stories. Bill Bryson is one of my favorite authors. He combines humor with great travel writing.
Do you prefer physical books or ebooks?
Physical books are my preference when I'm home, but when I'm leading tours, ebooks are much more practical. I can't carry many books in my backpack.
How often do you find time to read?
My reading schedule varies with the tourist seasons. During peak season, I mainly read in the evenings after tours, maybe an hour or two. But in the off-season, I probably read about 4 hours daily. Winter is my prime reading time. I use it to research new locations and historical facts for my tours. I also love reading by the fire in mountain lodges after a day of hiking.
Do you like to discuss books with others?
Oh yes, discussing books is actually a big part of my job. I often share interesting stories from books with my tour groups. It makes the locations come alive for them. I'm also part of an online community of tour guides where we recommend books about different regions and cultures. It's incredible how a good book can help you see a familiar place in a completely new light. Last month, we had a fascinating discussion about different books covering the Balkan region.
What was your favorite book when you were a child?
My favorite childhood book was Kakets na Hudi Poti, a Slovenian alpine adventure story. It's about a brave young boy who has adventures in the mountains. Looking back, it probably influenced my career choice. The descriptions of the alpine landscapes were so vivid that I would spend hours imagining myself in those mountains. Now I actually guide tours through some of the locations mentioned in the book.
Have you ever given a book as a gift? What was it?
As a tour guide, I often give books about local history and culture to my regular clients. Recently, I gave a beautifully illustrated book about alpine flora to a group that was particularly interested in our mountain wildflowers. I also love giving travel literature. I gave my nephew Into Thin Air when he started showing interest in mountaineering.
Do you like reading books in different languages?
Being a tour guide means reading in multiple languages is essential. I read primarily in Slovenian and English, with some German and Italian. Each language offers unique perspectives on our local history and culture. What's particularly interesting is how different languages describe the same locations or historical events. Sometimes you get completely different insights.
Has your taste in books changed over the years?
My reading interests have broadened significantly over the years. I started with purely adventure and travel books, but now I read extensively about history, geology, local folklore, and even botany. Working with tourists has taught me that people want to know about everything, from the rocks they're climbing on to the legends about the castles they're visiting. I've also developed a keen interest in books about sustainable tourism.
How do you choose which books to read next?
My book selection is often influenced by my upcoming tours. If I'm planning a new hiking route, I'll read books about that region's history and nature. I also follow several adventure travel blogs that recommend books. During winter, when tourism is slower, I love asking other tour guides across Europe for their favorite books about their regions.
Do you take notes while reading?
Yes, I'm quite systematic about note-taking. I use a special guide's notebook divided into sections: historical facts, local legends, nature information, and interesting trivia. When I read books in different languages, I note down how certain places are described. Tourists often appreciate hearing these different perspectives. I also sketch small maps and mark interesting locations mentioned in books.
What's your favorite place or time to read?
This might sound strange, but my favorite place to read is in mountain huts during tour breaks. There's something magical about reading about a place while being there. During off-season, I love reading by Lake Bled early in the morning. I have this specific bench with a perfect view of the castle. At home, I have a reading corner decorated with maps and travel photographs.
Have you ever started a book but couldn't finish it?
I started reading a detailed geological study of the Alps, but it was too technical for my needs. Instead, I found several books that explain geological concepts in a more accessible way. Now I use these simpler explanations when talking to tourists about our mountain formations. Sometimes you need to know when to switch to something more suitable.
Do you have any reading goals for this year?
This year, I'm trying to read histories of all the major regions I guide in. That's about 15 books. I'm also working through a list of environmental conservation books because more tourists are asking about climate change's impact on our mountains. Plus, I'm trying to improve my Italian by reading at least one Italian guidebook each month.
What was the last book you recommended to someone?
I recently recommended The Hidden Life of Trees to a group after they asked many questions during our forest tour. It perfectly explains complex ecological concepts in an engaging way. Several tourists have emailed me saying they bought it after the tour and now see forests differently.
How has reading helped you in your career or studies?
Reading has completely transformed my tour guiding. History books have given me fascinating stories to share, while geology books help me explain our landscape features. Recently, I read several books about local folklore, and my tours became much more engaging when I incorporated these stories. Reading in multiple languages has also helped me connect better with international tourists.
Do you remember the first book you read in English?
My first English book was Into Thin Air by John Krakauer. I chose it because it combined my love of mountains with my desire to learn English. Though challenging, the familiar mountaineering terms helped me understand the context. Now I recommend it to all my adventure tourism colleagues who are learning English.
How do you make time for reading despite your busy schedule?
My reading schedule changes with the tourism seasons. During peak season, I read early in the morning before tours begin, usually from 6 to 7 a.m. During off-season, I spend about 4 hours daily reading and researching. I also use winter evenings to catch up on my reading list. When I'm leading multi-day tours, I always bring an e-reader for the evenings at mountain lodges.
Have you ever read a book that changed your perspective on life?
The Hidden Life of Trees completely changed how I conduct forest tours. Before, I just focused on identifying trees and plants, but this book taught me about the complex relationships in forest ecosystems. Now I help tourists understand forests as communities rather than just collections of individual trees.
Do you have a favorite book series?
I love Bill Bryson's travel series, especially A Walk in the Woods and In a Sunburned Country. His writing combines humor with detailed historical and scientific information, exactly what I aim for in my tours. These books taught me how to make educational content entertaining, which has greatly improved my guiding style.
What do you think about book adaptations, movies, TV shows?
As a tour guide, I find adaptations interesting because they often showcase locations I'm familiar with. When The Chronicles of Narnia was filmed partly in Slovenia, it brought new tourists interested in seeing the filming locations. However, I always encourage people to read the books too, as they often contain richer historical and cultural details that films can't include.
What book would you like to read next?
I'm about to start The Last Wild Places of Slovenia. It combines nature photography with environmental conservation information. As a tour guide, I'm always looking for new perspectives on our natural heritage to share with visitors.
What advice would you give to someone who wants to start reading more?
I'd say start with stories about places or topics you love. Don't worry about reading speed. Some of my best insights come from slow, careful reading. Also, try reading about places you're planning to visit. It makes both the reading and the travel more meaningful.
If you could write a book, what would it be about?
I would write an insider's guide to the hidden gems of Slovenia's Alpine region. Not just the tourist spots, but the secret trails, local legends, and seasonal changes that only experienced guides know about. I'd include environmental conservation tips and ways to experience nature responsibly.
That's all for today's daily English room conversation practice. Thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed this video, like, leave a comment, and hit the subscribe button. See you next time.